you've been through a lot. The coach sucks. You got to get rid of him. Some of your most ardent fans are wearing paper bags over their head. We're talking about tanking. Daniel Jones is awful. The season's over. Yada, yada, yada. I have good news. I have reason to believe if you're a New York Football Giant fan. And sometimes belief comes from just taking a deep breath and thinking about the recent past. I want to bring you back not too long ago. And I am not doing this to make fun of anybody on this radio station because I love everybody and we all have opinions. But I want you to hear what was said about the New York Mets within the last 3 months. Hit it, Loogie!
This group here and this core here and what we're watching now will be gone. Will be gone in the offseason. It'll be gone at the trade deadline. This is going to be a full-blown colon cleanse of this organization.
Colon cleanse.
By David Stearns. And it better be. Let's put it that way. It better be.
From a colon...
Because if it's not, then what the hell are we doing?
What are we doing? From a colon cleanse to a wild card race. That was said about the Mets a few months ago.
It is Prostate Awareness Month, is it not?
That's true. It's very timely. Let me give you another example of what was said about the now wild card leading New York Mets.
The Mets season is over. They are done. They are boring. They stink. Everybody knows it. Now it's time to act on that.
Yeah.
You want Lindor? How much of his contract do I have to eat? You want McNeil? Take him. He stinks. You want Diaz? I respect him. I'm not trying to diss him. Not the same guy. Go. You want Nimmo? Take him.
Here's the thing. I am not saying
that was BT, by the way.
That was BT.
Toasted and toasted.
This is not to make fun of G or BT because those guys offered an opinion that most people actually had. That most people listening called up this radio station and said. So don't take this as, wow, they're a bunch of idiots. No. That was most of us. And then what happened? The New York Mets turned their season around. They won a walk-off game last night, and with just merely, it's unbelievable to think about this, with 12 games to go in the season, the New York Mets are the third wild card team. Now, imagine and think about what has been said about the New York Giants over the last week and a half. The head coach is a buffoon. The quarterback's inept. The core's rotten. They got to trade everybody. So, Tiki, can the New York Football Giants of 2024 replicate the New York Mets of 2024?
Well, they're not quite where the Mets were yet. The Mets were so far under 500. What was that, 11 games that they ultimately reached to? And that's when people, I think that was probably the time frame where BT and Sal or Gio were going off on the Mets. But the reality is it's 2 games into the season. And the Giants, get this, are a game out of first place in the NFC East. I know it doesn't feel like it, but the facts are the facts. But the perception is exactly what you're talking about. People have quit on the New York Giants. Hell, Sean wore a bag on his head yesterday for the entire day. I can't tell you how I couldn't get that image out of my head. It was like Mushmouth was staring at me from across the glass for the entirety of our show. And last week, after one loss, you were ready to tank for whoever. So is that perception that the Mets had early in their season, whatever it was, 20 games in, where they're under 500 so many games, and people were like, get rid of everybody? Yeah, it probably is the perception of a lot of guys. But can they be the Mets? Of course they can. You know why? Because it's the NFL, and the Giants are still getting better. The only thing we got to ask, and this is where we'll ponder, I think, is who is their Francisco Lindor? Who is the guy who rises to the occasion, becomes not only the clubhouse, or in this case, locker room leader, but also just starts balling? Really, it's that.
Right.
That's the thing that matters most. Because other than Malik Neighbors' great game last weekend, who's balled for this team? Like, who is the stud? Who is the guy that you're saying, all right, I just saw my first Giant game. First 2, I want his jersey.
Well, it's tough because a baseball player is at the plate with guys on base, and they can take center stage. Football is so different. But in terms of who's that kind of player, I think you've got a couple of choices. I mean, Dexter Lawrence is a hell of a football player.
True.
He made an impact more so in week 1 than he even did last week. Certainly Daniel Jones is not Francisco Lindor, but we've seen Daniel Jones quarterback a team to the postseason.
Right.
That doesn't mean he's your franchise quarterback. That doesn't mean, this is the guy you want for the next 10 years. But he was good enough to be the quarterback of a team that made the playoffs and won a round. And that's the other similarity that the Giants and the Mets actually have. 2 years ago, the New York Mets won over 100 games and they made the postseason. 2 years ago, the New York Giants shocked the world, won 9 games, made the playoffs, and did something even the Mets couldn't do. Mets couldn't win a playoff series. The Giants were able to win a playoff game. And then the following year, maybe to the shock of all of us, both teams came crashing down to earth in pathetic fashion. The Mets went from being a 100-win team to a team that was selling at the trade deadline. The New York Football Giants last year went from a team that had gone to the second round of the postseason to believing and trusting Tommy DeVito, right? So both crashed down a year ago, and both got off to bad starts. Like, every comparison isn't perfect. There is no Francisco Lindor on this team. But the Giants are being buried 2 weeks into the year. 2 weeks into the year, I'm hearing about how the coach has to go, the quarterback should be benched, everything sucks, they suck, you suck, we all suck. And my brain is saying, boy, this sounds familiar. Boy, it's like I heard this before. And I did. I heard it 3 months ago about the Mets. It was literally the same thing. So I know this doesn't work for Sean because he's a Yankee fan who hates the Mets. But for those like Loogie, who is a Met fan and a Giant fan, may I ask you a simple question? Why the hell not? Like, why 2 weeks into a football season, which granted is the equivalent of 18 baseball games, if we're being fair. So, the Giants are the equivalent of being 0-18 right now. But if they win next week, guess what? They're 9-18. It's not the end of the world. Why can't we imagine the Giants doing something just a little bit similar to what the Mets just did not that long ago?
But remember, the Mets needed a spark, whether it was a team meeting, whether it was a song, whether it was Grimace. The Giants need that same spark. They need a savior. His name is Thomas Giuseppe DeVito. Tommy DeVito should be the quarterback. I'm serious. They need something to get them going. Saquon Barkley could drop all the passes he wants. The Giants still have to stack W's. They need a jolt in that locker room, Teak. They need it.
You are, if anything, consistent.
He's very loyal to Tommy DeVito.
100% consistent. It's the shared first name, I'm sure. But, look, even though he is probably a little misguided that it's going to be Tommy DeVito, he's right. There needs to be, and this is kind of what I was alluding to, Evan, there needs to be somebody who just starts balling, right? And not in their PFF grade balling, because there's plenty of guys who have, I'm sure, graded out pretty well via PAF. But I mean, game-impacting plays. I mean, strip sacks if you're a defensive player, INTs if you're a secondary player, cause fumbles, force fumbles if you're a linebacker, big play, breaking tackles, scoring touchdowns for Devin Singletary, or just over the top doing Odell Beckham level crap if you're one of these wide receivers, right? That's what needs to happen in order for the catalyst to occur for an NFL team. It's like really hard to just piece your way into good. You know what I mean? Especially when you struggled. And so it takes a belief. It takes a development of an identity, and that's what the Giants are still figuring out. Now, the good thing is that from week 1 to week 2, it looked so much better.
Well, it could look worse.
Exactly, but it could have looked the same.
Sure.
And honestly, that's what I was scared of.
Yeah.
That it was just going to get there was going to be another dud, another. Oh, God, that was gross. I could have turned that thing off a quarter in and not miss anything. It wasn't that, right? There were some good pieces to it, in particular, the Daniel Jones-Malik Neighbors combo. But ultimately, the best thing you can do is win, and the Giants have to do that. Yeah. I mean, it's early, and we always say you can never say it's must win after a certain moment, but if the Giants want to be anything and keep their fan base believing in them, they have to beat the Cleveland Browns.
Oh, no question about it. No question. Like, here's the difference with baseball. You can struggle all the way until June, get hot, and turn your season around. In the equivalent of a 17-game season, this is June. No, I agree. This is June. This is the moment where they have to turn things around. And, you ask, well, what would be the thing to spark them? What would be the player? See, I don't think it's one player, but if I wanted to answer that question with one player, the answer is Malik Neighbors. And I'll give you a Giant comparison on how I think this could look on a Giant turnaround. And the season I'm thinking of, while it didn't end well, was an 11-win season. And I think we all would like an 11-win season. I think we'd be happy with an 11-win season. And that was 2016. In 2016, the New York Giants added a lot of talent on defense. And for that 1 year, a lot of the free agent hits that they had hit. And they actually had a top 5 defense. Their offense literally was throw to Odell Beckham Jr. and let him do crazy crap.
Yeah.
That was literally their offense.
Right.
And so when I look at this Giant team right now, their offense, and it's only been 2 games, and I know you love them, Sean loves them, Loogie loves them. Giant fans are in love with Malik Neighbors. In fact, it looks like Sean's wearing a Malik Neighbors t-shirt already. With 2 weeks in.
Oh, you're sticking with that? You like that now?
I never didn't. I
You
love it.
like that?
Yeah. Oh, he likes that.
I love it.
I think we saw how aggressive the Giants were this past week in targeting Malik Neighbors and trying to get him involved in this offense.
18 of the 27.
So I think that offensively, that's the spark. And defensively, this is a boring answer, but it's the truth. You just need guys to play better. Dexter Lawrence is an impact player. Brian Burns can be an impact player. Kayvon Thibodeau is growing into an impact player.
Kayvon is Lindor, by the way.
You think so?
The undeserved, maybe some deserved, but the criticism of he's not the kind of player we thought we were getting, but still makes impactful plays.
Yeah,
you need him to take off and carry that defense.
But he's got to start doing it.
I agree.
He's got to start doing it.
And after April, Lindor started doing it.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no perfect comparison with this because Lindor was a superstar player in another city, but maybe in terms of draft expectations, yeah, Kayvon was drafted with expectations of being a star. But one thing I said to you 2 weeks ago, and I still believe it 2 weeks into the season, they have talent on defense.
Of course they do.
This Shane Bowen defense should be a lot better than what we've seen over the first 2 weeks, and I don't necessarily know if 2 weeks in we can make the declarative statements that everyone wanted to make about the Mets 2 weeks and 2 months into the season. Like, they have more talent than being the worst team in the NFL.
No,
I believe that 2 weeks ago, and I certainly believe that now.
They're not the worst team in the NFL. Even statistically, they're not, even though they haven't scored a ton. So they're down there in that category. But we know that the talent is there. It's just putting it all together. That's what it feels like. And so much of it is new, so it's easy to explain it away if you're going to be a blind supporter. But the reality is winning is the only thing that matters in the NFL. It doesn't matter how you get it done. For instance, I'm calling the Chicago Bears this weekend. They're 1-1. They look terrible last weekend in their loss to the Houston Texans. But they're 1-1, so they won a game, right? It feels terrible to look bad, but you got a victory. Even the Jets would say this in some regards.
Yes.
You know, I think they look better than is probably being perceived out there. But you just have to win. It doesn't matter how you do it. And if you're going to win ugly, then win ugly. And if that's going to be how you do it, do it.
Yes. And I'll tell you another comparison that kind of rings true with the Mets, especially late in May when they were burying themselves. They were burying themselves, but they were still not buried.
Yes.
Like, they were 11 games under 500, but I would look at the standings and say, wow, they're only 5 games out of a wild card spot. And that mattered. It mattered because you can make up those 5 games if you turn your season around. Well, last night, the Philadelphia Eagles reminded the entire country on that embarrassingly pathetic Philadelphia-centric broadcast known as ESPN. I think it was Kyle Brandt who phrased this, so I'll copy Kyle and give him credit. The E in ESPN last night standed for Eagles.
Right.
And I think we all saw that. But we all saw the Eagles defense on full display. We all saw the Dallas Cowboys over the weekend on full display. The New York Giants are a game out of the division. And by the way, there's a decent chance the Eagles and the Cowboys are both going to be 1-2. Dallas has to play Baltimore. The Eagles are dealing with the red-hot, you can't stop New Orleans Saints. So I know that may not seem like it matters, but it mattered for the Mets back in May. And they were able to pull themselves up. They were able to get themselves in a race. And on September 17th, much to the shock of most people on this radio station and most people listening, you all were wrong. The Mets are alive.
Yeah.
So why can't the Giants be the Mets?
They can be. It's just, but it has to start with victory soon. And by soon, I mean this weekend. Otherwise, that 0-3 becomes, what is it, 0-2 27?
Wait, you just hit on it. No, wait a second. Stop right there.
You're doing 9 games per NFL weekend?
No, it's not the O. It's not that. It's the O.
Oh.
He said O, and he's right. The New York Mets turnaround involved OMG. So you're right. So you know what? Do me a favor, Tiki.
Okay.
I want you to give me a couple of minutes.
And you're going to create an AI song?
When we come back,
Don't do it.
not
Giants don't
only
do that.
are we going to take your phone calls on the renaissance of the New York Giants, why can't they be the New York Mets? We are going to present to you the rally song for the New York Giants. Much like the Mets have OMG, what should the Giants have?
Oh, we're not doing that.
You're going to hear it, you're going to love it, and we're all going to believe coming up. Toll-free numbers 888-808-1019.